Hey guys, Diana here from Garden Love. So today I want to talk to you guys about this awesome Eureka lemon tree that I'm growing at Spiller. And it has tons and tons of fruit all over this tree, in the back and in the front. I'll zoom in a little bit and show you guys what I'm talking about. I posted some pictures on Instagram, a little video showing my fruit tree in a container. You can't see it right now, but it's in a big container. And I've had it for quite some time, but some people were asking me questions about the tree. How long have I had it? How old it is? How do I feed it? What size container it is? Lots of questions. So I want to go ahead and answer some of those questions. That's why I'm making this video. But I want to tell you guys that this tree has actually taught me a lot about growing citruses in containers. I've made a lot of errors with this tree. And I made a lot of adjustments, and therefore I've learned a lot when it comes to this Eureka lemon. A lot of people think that Eureka lemons grow way too big to grow them in containers, but this has proved that it is definitely possible. And as you can see, it's growing. It's about 5 feet tall and it has tons of fruit. You might not be able to see them because they're camouflage, but there is tons of fruit on this tree. Okay, so I wrote some notes because there's a lot of information I want to share with you guys, like how to select the fruit tree, what kind of soil do you put in when you're growing them in containers, how do I feed it, how often do I water it, all those questions I'm going to answer today and give you all the little tricks and tips that I've learned throughout these last 7 years with this beautiful Eureka lemon. Okay, so to start, there's different sizes of containers that you can buy citrus trees in. You can buy them in a small container like this, maybe slightly bigger and longer, or you can buy them in a 5-gallon, or you can buy them in like maybe a 25-gallon to 25. And from this size to the 25, they range in price. For instance, this tree, I purchased it for $14.99 in a container slightly longer than this, just about this wide, and it was $14.99. You can also find them for $25.99, or you can find them for the 25 gallons anywhere from $80 to $100. Just depends on the tree and how mature the tree is. Okay, so there's a few tricks when it comes to looking for that. For instance, I just recently bought a Rio Red. If you guys saw that previous video that already had some huge fruit on it, I went to I believe it was Acre. I can't remember the name of the nursery. I'll put it up above or in the descriptions. And it's a nursery where they have 2 locations. One location gets more traffic than the other one. And I went to the location where they rarely get any traffic. So therefore, any containers that they have there, any fruit trees that they have there, they're going to be sitting in there a lot longer. And in exchange, they're going to be more mature trees. So that's one trick that you can look for when you're purchasing your citrus trees. Okay, and it's up to you when you decide what price range you're comfortable with. Okay, personally, I always go with the $25 to $30 just because it's more affordable. If I had a choice, I would definitely go with the $80 to $100 just because I'm getting a much larger mature tree that's going to be giving me fruit a lot sooner. Okay, and it also varies from fruit. Like, for instance, my Meyer lemon gave me fruit the first year I got it. This Eureka lemon, I'm gonna be honest with you and frank, this is the first year I got fruit, but there's a lot of things that I did wrong that I learned from, that if I would have done them the way I know how to do it now, I feel that this tree would have given me fruit a lot sooner. And that's what we're here to talk about. Okay, so we talked about the different size containers that are available when you buy citrus trees. Okay, you want to look for something that's the more mature the better. Okay, especially if you're looking to getting fruit sooner. If you're patient and you're willing to wait as long as it takes, then you can get a smaller container like the one I showed you here. And that's what I did with this one. Back then, 7 years ago, I wasn't exactly sure how to do things. I didn't know what kind of soil to get. I didn't know what kind of amendment. I didn't know how often to feed it and water it, where to put it, how much sun and how much shade it should get. I didn't know the answers to any of those, and I didn't know what to look for either. So therefore, I was afraid to spend the money, a little bit more than $15 to $20, because I wasn't sure if the tree was going to survive or not, because I didn't have the knowledge. So I want to share that information with you in case you guys want to grow citrus trees. You guys know exactly what to look for, and kind of like a base starting base on how to get started a citrus tree that one day will look as beautiful as this one. Okay. Alright, so I made notes because there's a lot of information I want to share with you, and I want to make sure that I don't forget it. So we talked about selecting the trees. Now when you bring it home, what are you going to do? You're going to have to select the size of the container that you're going to put it in, and what soil are you going to use once you get it inside the container. Okay, because there's so many soils out there. There's potting soil, there's raised bed soil, and then there's amendment soil to put in the ground. Which is which? Okay, so potting soil is soil obviously for container growing. Okay, then there's raised beds, not necessarily good for containers, but you can put it in a raised bed and then you can add amendment to that. Okay, and then there's soil where you are just amending the soil that your native soil that you're gonna plant something in there. When it comes to container gardening, which is how I'm growing this container, you want to make sure that you get some potting soil, okay, and not just any potting soil. When it comes to citrus, you want to make sure that you get the right mixture. You have to get a citrus and palm, okay, something that has citrus in it. I'm gonna show you my favorite brand and my favorite citrus and palm soil, so you guys can see what I use now. This is not what I used back then, and I believe that's part of the reason why it took so long to bear fruit, okay, among other things. Okay, when it comes to growing citrus, this is my #1 soil that I use. Okay, #1. So I add citrus and palm from EB Stone. And they have a product that I ran out that I currently don't have. I'll do it in future videos and I'll show you guys. And if you guys go back to any of my repotting videos, you guys will see this. I use it in every single one of my repotting videos, because whenever I repot it, I believe it's my opinion that it has made the biggest difference when it comes to getting my trees established and getting started and growing. Okay, so I add some citrus and palm mix. Then I add some Shirt Star, and the other thing I love is some worm castings. EB Stone has some worm castings as well. So all of those 3 products are from EB Stones. I absolutely love their products, and I mix all those 3 into one container, mix it all up, and then I add my brand new container. Okay, now if you get a 5-gallon, you have to make sure that you don't go way too big. You have to kind of like upgrade. It's kind of like shoes, you know, when you wear shoes, you're not gonna go, you know, eventually you're going to, as a kid, you're gonna go from maybe a size 2 to a size 4, but you're not going to buy the size 4 right away. You might go a slightly bigger just because you want to fit into it and you want them to last you a little bit. And it's the same thing when it comes to repotting your trees. Okay, you want to make sure that you go a little bit bigger but not too big, because then, you know, for the trees, the water is going to be going where it's less resistant, which is going to be outside of the root ball, and you're not going to be getting a lot of water and nutrients into that root ball. You have to wait for those roots to start growing and it get established, and then once those roots are established, then you can upgrade. It's just like your feet, like I mentioned, you have to grow into the right shoe. Okay, and that's what you want to do with your citrus. You want to keep moving up. So if you have a 5-gallon, move to maybe a 15-gallon, a 25, eventually until you get a 30. I believe this is about a 35-gallon container. It's kind of slightly smaller than the traditional wine barrels, and I'll show you guys in a little bit. I know you guys can't see, but I want to get through this before I start showing you guys the tree. So when you repot it, you want to make sure that you're not going too big. Okay, those are the 3 things that I use now to repot any of my citrus trees. So the citrus and palm from EB Stone, the worm castings. Honestly, you can use worm castings from any brand. I happened to find EB Stones for the first time, and I was so happy because I absolutely love their products. And then Shirt Star, which is the #1 product that I think makes the biggest difference when it comes to repotting, because it helps the roots get established, it helps them with the transplant shock, and it just makes the biggest difference in my opinion. I don't know the whole scientific reason behind it, but all I know that I've noticed the difference between the trees that I repot without Shirt Star and the trees that I repot with Shirt Star. Okay, so those are the things that you're gonna have to consider when you're repotting your tree. Make sure you get a good palm and citrus soil. I recommend EB Stone, some worm castings, and some Shirt Star, okay, to help with that. So that we talked about soil now. Another thing that I completely I would say messed up when it came to this tree when I first got it was the feeding and the watering schedule. Because everything, all the research that I did said, oh, you don't have to water it only once a week, twice a week. You know, citrus don't like to have wet feet, and then feed them only 3 times a year. And all that is true, but it's not true when it comes to growing in containers, because you have to keep in mind when you're growing in containers, your tree and your container, all the resources and all that's available for this tree is inside the container. Okay, when they're in the ground, they have endless resources, and the tree would do whatever it takes to get whatever it is that they need. Okay, but when they're in the container, they don't have access to those resources. Okay, so what they have is us. Okay, it's up to us to make sure we're watering it enough. It's up to us to make sure that we're feeding it enough, and it's up to us to make sure that we're putting it in the right spot, because it's been my experience that even though they says that all citrus love full sun, they don't always love full sun. And that's let me see. So the difference is going to be between mature and a young citrus tree. So a young citrus tree is not going to like full sun. It's going to like more shade, partial shade, partial sun, because it doesn't have those big roots established in the container or in the ground, okay, like a big tree would, where it has the resources to pull everything they need to keep growing and taking care of itself from the sun. Okay, so that's another thing to consider. Yes, citrus trees love the heat and the sun, but not when they're young. And that's one thing I didn't know, because I would often put this in the sun, full sun, and I was like, what's wrong with my tree? You know, well, that was something that I learned from this tree. When I moved it here, it absolutely loved the partial shade, and partial sun. And ever since then, the flowers wouldn't just fall off because they would get burned off, and the tree was completely dehydrated from the burning heat. So that's something else to consider. Okay, so okay, another thing that I learned from this tree. My previous house, I had a huge backyard, but everything was concrete. It was wide open, got plenty of sun, like every tree likes, right? But keep in mind, this tree was not a mature tree, and it couldn't handle the full heat. Not to mention that when you're putting it on top of concrete, it's creating even more heat off the concrete, okay, and it's baking the roots. And you're forgetting that some trees all trees like to have something living in it, like worms. Okay, how are the worms going to get inside your container if they're sitting on concrete? There's no worms moving around in the concrete. Okay, usually they are in the dirt. You put it on top of turf, or you put it on top of the side of your ground, the worms will find their way inside the tree and create worm castings. Okay, so you added worm castings to get it started. Sometimes in the worm casting there's actual eggs of worms, and they'll create some worms in there, but no worm's gonna survive in a place where it's burning hot and there's no way, no shelter. Okay, basically putting it in the concrete, there's absolutely no shelter. So I recommend, if you have any trees, that you put it on top of your grass or on top of your dirt, somewhere where worms can actually have access to your tree. Okay, that was something that I realized, that the tree actually it made a difference when I moved it from the concrete to a place like this. And I'll show you in a little bit. I know I'm talking about the container and where I have it located, and you can't see it at the moment, but I just want to get through this list and tell you guys what I've done to this tree to get it to this point. Okay, now support, that's another thing. I had it in my backyard. In my backyard was like I mentioned, large, open. Whenever we had high winds here in California, my tree would just be like flapping all over the place. And 2 years ago, the winds were so high that I mean 2 years ago it was a 5-year-old, but because I hadn't been giving it the proper care, it wasn't growing that much, and it wasn't the roots weren't as big as I wanted them to be. I remember one time I pulled it out of the container and I'm like, what's going on? The roots aren't getting this big. and I'm like, this tree is not growing at all. I've had it for so long and it's not growing, you know. So the tree was just like all over the place, and it lost one of its biggest branches, and I was so sad, because I'm like, I've had it for 5 years. It's taken so long to get it to this point, and now the biggest branch is gone, you know. I was so disappointed and sad. So then I was like, well, I'm gonna give it some support, and that's how the aspalair was inspired. This tree inspired the aspalair style. As you guys know, a lot of the trees that I'm growing are aspalair. So I put this support, I don't know if you guys can see it, I'll show you guys in a second if you guys can. I put this fencing in the back, and I started holding the branches with some gardening string and stretchy material, and then all of a sudden it took off because it had support. The wind wasn't hurting the branches, it had some support, so it started growing a lot of leaves. And then what I did was I added some short star. By then I already knew about short star, so I pulled some short star, and I kind of started shaking the dirt on top, and I put some in there, and then it took off. Okay, it took off. It started getting tons of leaves, but I still hadn't received some fruit from it. It was flowering, but the flowers weren't staying, and that's because it was still sitting on top of concrete. Okay, so that's the few things that I have learned from this tree. Okay, now feeding. Okay, when I realized that all the research that I was doing, I was like 3 times a year and watering not as often. That's another reason why my flowers kept falling off, because it didn't have the proper fluids inside the tree to retain those flowers, because when it's flowering it requires a lot of water to retain the flowers and all the foliage and the continuing growing that citrus trees do during the heat. So I realized that I was doing something wrong. I can't remember where I learned this from, but what I learned is that when it comes to container gardening, you are the only resource available to your tree. So therefore I started feeding it once a month. So once a month I started feeding it. Actually, I think it was my friend Mike from Green Thumb Nursery. I would often go talk to him and get some feedback and say, hey, what's going on? This is what I'm doing. I'm not sure what I should be doing, blah blah. So he advised that I gave it some more food. So I started feeding it once a month. Not only this citrus tree, by then I had more citruses. I had my Mexican key lime that was gifted from me from an awesome guy named Robert, and then a friend of mine, and then I always like to have pears, so I got it a second Mexican key lime, and you know, by then I was already growing with citrus and palm, and I was doing the short star, and I was I started feeding them more often, and my Mexican key lime started getting a lot of fruit, but I was losing a lot due to the heat and due to the fact that it was on concrete. Because remember, keep in mind, I lived in my old house, but when I moved here maybe about a year ago, I realized the big difference that it makes when you have it on top of soil or turf or anything where worms have access to. Okay, so we moved here. This tree had a whole new microsystem, and what I learned from the new microsystem is that this tree had more shade, was on top of turf, it had a support system with the trellis, okay, and it started blooming. Another thing, okay, where it's at, it gets water every single day on a schedule, because my sprinkler hits this pot, this container, and it's getting consistent water. And I think that's another factor that made a big difference when it comes to container gardening. Keep in mind that the soil in your container is gonna dry out and it's gonna heat up due to the heat. Okay, so it's up to you to water it every day when it's this hot. Like today's 100 degrees, and I've been dying to come out here and make some videos and talk to you guys all about my garden, and this was one of the videos that I've been wanting to do, but it's been so hot. But today I was like, I have to suck it up and I have to get out there, and this is where I'm at now. Okay, it's you probably see some sweat drops, and that's why I have my glasses on, because the sun's right here. But you need to water it. I know that all the research says water your fruit trees once or twice a week, deep soaking. Keep in mind, okay, that's in the ground. The ground retains water, so the roots of your trees have resources to go deep down and get some water if they need it. In a container, once it dries out, it dries out. Their only resource available is you, and you have to water it. So when it's really hot, I water my trees every day. Once a week, I'll do a deep soak, like I'll let the water flood and then do that twice, okay? But I do water my tree every day when it's this hot, over 90 degrees. Every day I sprinkle it with water and make sure that the topsoil is moist, because keep in mind that citrus trees have shallow roots, and those are the feeder roots, and you want those feeder roots to stay alive and well hydrated. If your topsoil dries out, those feeder roots are gonna die out as well, okay? And then it's gonna take a whole set of weeks or months for those roots to continue to grow again and reset and restart again, and you don't want that. You want to make sure that you keep it going, okay? You don't want setbacks. You want to keep moving forward and keep moving forward, okay? So let's see, supporting. So those are the major things that I wrote here on my list to talk to you guys about. Watering was a big thing, because that I noticed the biggest difference in my citrus trees that I water. This is my kumquat. If you can see that, I water that every day. You guys have seen the abundance of kumquats that both my trees give me, this one and that one right there behind me. And that's because I water them every day. I'm home most of the time, so I enjoy watering it. But if you guys have to go to work and you guys have things, you guys are just really busy with life, there is an irrigation system that you can set up with the drop, with the little holes from your sprinklers. You just unscrew it, you put the little adapter, you put the little holes going into your pot, and every time your sprinklers go off, they will be watering your plants. Now, I have asked Steve Liss. If you guys don't follow him already, go ahead and check him out. I'll post his link right above. He is basically like a dictionary. He has so much information, and any questions that I may have, I always go to him. And I asked him if he can come and help me set up an irrigation system for my containers, because I have tons of them and I'm anticipating that the next few months are going to be busy for me. So I need to set it up, and I'm going to be recording that video so you guys can see what I'm doing to set up my garden to stay hydrated in water and they can get the water that they need to continue to grow and thrive. All right guys, well, I'm going to show you now what this container looks like and what the tree looks like, and end it at that. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. Quite frankly, when you guys ask me questions about my garden, it really triggers thoughts, because sometimes some of the things that I say or don't say, I assume you guys know, because I do have a lot of subscribers that are so knowledgeable, so helpful. I love you guys all. You guys give me tons of tips when I need the help, and you guys know I just started my vegetable garden. You guys have been so helpful when it comes to that. So sometimes I take it for granted that you guys know a lot of these things, but I know there's people out there like I once was that did not know anything, and I wish I had a starting point, and I hope that this video provided that information, that starting base to help you with. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave it in the comments below, because I know that it's sometimes some questions you might think that, oh, it's a silly question, but it's not. It really could be the missing piece to your foundation to start growing your container gardening. Okay, well, I'm going to show you what this container is. Thank you so much for your constant support. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe. If you haven't set the alarm, go ahead and set it for more videos like this. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you what this tree is looking like now, and you can tell me what you think, and hopefully it inspires you to continue to grow or to start growing your... Sorry about that. So let's see. As you can see, I hope my shadow doesn't... so as you can see the container there, it's about 20, maybe 30 gallons container. Okay, and as you can see, hopefully my camera doesn't overcast all these beautiful lemons on my Eureka lemon. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. There's more back there. So you can see this tree is full of fruit, and there's more up there. It's like growing fruit and then flowering, producing some more little baby fruit, as you can see right there. And it's just ongoing. So far I've had 2 lemons drop from this tree. It was delicious. They weren't as yellow as I thought they would be, so I went ahead and leave them in the counter so they can ripen, and it was super delicious. Okay, now I do have a Eureka lemon as well. If you guys have any questions about that, I use the same method that I just gave you guys, repotting it, and that tree started producing fruit the second I brought it home. Okay, it didn't take as long as this tree, and like I mentioned, I knew how to do things a lot differently than when I got this tree. Okay, and the branch that was broken was from right there. I don't know if you can see it, but there used to be a branch right here, and it broke. And what I did is I cover it with Ivy organic paint. Okay, and I sealed it right there so I can protect it from any bugs or anything that might want to get in there and start killing my tree. So far it's doing great, and let me step back so you guys can get a last view of what this tree looks like. Alright guys, well that will conclude this video. I hope you guys have an amazing day, have a blessed day, and I'll see you guys on the next one.